Hello, good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody that's online, and good evening, members of the committee. My name's Councillor Stefan Gavryshak. I'm the co-chair with Catherine, and I will be chairing this evening. And welcome members of the committee and officers as well. Thank you. Right, we will go through the agenda. Item 1, there are no chair's announcements. Apologies for absence.
Yeah, we've got one apology from Councillor Alexandrine Cantor, and we have Councillor Sutu who's here as a substitute.
Now we have the minutes of the last meeting. Now, just to say to the committee, there were the minutes of the meeting, but there were also confidential minutes at the end. If any of you want to discuss the confidential minutes, we will defer those and open up a confidential session at the end of the meeting. Is there anybody who wants to raise anything in the confidential minute, please? I see none. Therefore, we have the minutes of the last meeting, so can I adopt and sign them on your behalf? Is that okay?
Yep.
Yes? Yes. Okay. So that is done. Item 4, update on previous recommendations from joint scrutiny, which you have as item 4. It was waste vehicle purchasing strategy and Didcot Garden Town delivery plan update and next steps. Are there any comments that members of the committee would like to make on those 2 items? So we're happy to accept the updates. Fine, thank you. Item 5, are there any declarations of interest on items on the agenda this evening? I see none, thank you. 7, we have no public participation. 8, work schedule and dates for joint scrutiny meetings. As you see today, we have waste and BIFA and transformation. And in September, we've got the SABA report and the GLL. Any comments on the...
And the JLP.
And the JLP, yes. And then the RAR.
Chair, my only comment on that is that is a very significant and chunky agenda. If we've got SABA, the Joint Local Plan and GLL.
Yeah, sorry, just to let you know, the Joint Local Plan has its own meeting on Thursday.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
No, it's perfectly good point, Joe, because we had a meeting a little while ago that was jam-packed full. The next meeting in September is SABA, GLL and Community Safety Partnership. We tended to do that in an evening, so that's okay. But yes, we've got to take a little bit of care with the volume on meetings. Are there any other comments? Okay, thank you very much. Therefore, we move on to item 9, which is the BIFA annual report. And I wonder if I could invite Mark to present this report. Please, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. So first, an apology from Councillor Sam James-Laurie, who's unable to join us today, either in person or online. So I'm representing both of the district councillors, if that's acceptable.
That's fine.
So as a key frontline service, has a direct impact on every household in the 2 districts. The BIFA waste and street cleansing contract is of great importance to both residents and the councils. BIFA's performance is subject to review by this committee, and the report included with the agenda pack shows their performance for the calendar year 2023. There are 3 key areas covered by the report. These are key performance, customer satisfaction, and council satisfaction. These three have been scored using the defined system, which is throughout the council, and then reviewed by the head of service to consider anything which is not part of the methodology, but should be taken into account when reaching a final rating. Overall, the rating is considered good, but the report does note that there are some areas of weakness in performance, particularly surrounding street cleansing. And this is something that we have been working on jointly, along with officers over the past year, and look to improve. So I'm happy to endorse this report being reviewed by the committee, and officers from BIFA and the council are in attendance to answer any questions that members may have.
Members of the committee, have any questions, please? Councillor Rock, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark, for the report. I just had a couple of questions. Firstly, and I can't tell you the page number because I didn't write it down. Sorry. Fly tipping. We've seen a significant increase in 34 kpt 10. Fly tips up to 1,237, up from 1,144 last year. That's like just shy of 10%, I think, isn't it? And then in high intensity areas, 71 compared with 32 last year. Is there any detail as to why we've seen such an increase in fly tipping, in particular in high intensity areas, but across the board? And how is that? Presumably that comes out of we pay for that, or is that included in the contract?
I'll allow the officers to answer the detail of that, okay, but I will just make an observation that that we can't tell exactly why people are fly tipping unless we take them to court and prosecute them. And there's a considerable number of those fly tips that don't actually get prosecuted because we can't locate who they are. So it could be, factors such as the cost of taking business waste away. It could also just be the fact that people are lazy and don't want to go to the household waste recycle centre and will dump the bags elsewhere. So I can't tell you for certain, but I'll ask the officers if they can one, address that, and then two, talk about the charging.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so with the number of fly tips, Mark is exactly right. We don't know the reasons why and what's increasing it. We do know a number of them aren't actually fly districts, so it's people driving in and through that are causing fly tips. So it's through the enforcement that we find out those actions, and with the enforcement it would be down to if there's any evidence, witness statements, which the team will try to pursue. But if we've got a pile of green garden waste, it's very unlikely that we're going to get any evidence from that unless there's a witness that's seen it happen.
So on cost,
That's part of the
thank
contract costs.
so it's included. So BIFA is taking the hit on that, as it were.
It would be a part of the contract cost that is passed back to the council.
Pass back to us. Okay, thank you. I guess my point is that if we're going to continue to see an upward trend in fly tipping, we need to understand why, or do our best to try and understand why, and to try and tackle it at the source. And I don't know how we do that, whether that be, we're very good at publicising when we have successful prosecutions. I think that's a very good way of, letting people know that we take it seriously. But I think it's probably something, if it continues, it's probably something we have to look at more deeply, I would imagine. If it keeps going up by 10% a year or doubling in high intensity areas.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily take a trend just on 1 year, because next year we might be 15% down, for example. Let's hope. And I think, what I would say is you may well have seen them yourselves, but where we have when we had reported fly tipping, we do put the Eurocrime. Envirocrime. I've got Europe on my mind at the moment. Envirocrime, we'll monitor that and see if we can get any evidence from it. And we also do have the ability to do some surveillance as well. So, unfortunately, if it's an area that's not regularly fly tipped, how do you protect from that? So.
Could I add one more thing, that fly tipping is not just big bulky items. So the high intensity, for example, could be black sacks left next to a litter bin.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. One more question, if that's right. Thank you. And that is related to small electrical items that get put by the side of the bin. Now, what I don't think has been reported is the number of times people have reported seeing waste collectors chuck small electricals into the refuse truck and not put them into the separated area. So I've had an email from somebody who says one Wallingford resident has watched on a couple of occasions and wrote to the council about having witnessed small electrical items being slung into the main bin. And the response from the council was the vehicle that was in use did not have the cage for recycling, and it was due to a high vehicle which didn't have the cages fitted. So presumably because one of the vehicles was out of action. But we don't have any, and that was reported, we don't have any of that data. I would love it if next year we could have data about the numbers, volumes, whatever, of small electrical items and textile items that are recycled successfully. I know we have that data. It'd be good to see it in this report. Thank you.
I think there's two different things, isn't there? It's how much we recycle, and then there's the danger of putting them in the wrong place, which is what you're.
This is a case of the operatives.
So again,
this is a case of the operatives.
Yes.
Putting electrical waste into the bin.
Understood. That's what your residents is complaining about. But what you asked for is the statistics of how much we're recycling, which are two different things.
Well, quite, but we don't have either. I mean, we don't have information about how much we're recycling our electricals in this report.
Yeah, I don't know that that's sort of applicable to this report, because this is about BIFA's performance. So if we give them a target and say you are to, I don't know, it'd be hard to give them a target for something like small electrical items.
What are we assessing them on for small electricals then? We're just saying that they do it. We're not assessing them on others.
We're not assessing them, no. But the other issue, for me, is the more concerning, and I'm sure the BIFA would be saying the same thing. Yeah. And I personally reported twice, because unless the operatives know what's inside that bag, it could be, for example, small disposable vapes, which we tell people they should recycle as what you're calling weed. If those go into the normal waste and then get crushed, there is a possibility of causing a fire. So those electrical items should not be put into. Totally agree. Even if the cage is, even if the vehicle does not have a cage. Conversely, then what we will have is people reporting that those items have not been collected. They've just been left. Yeah. Which actually is the right way of dealing with it, not from in the truck.
I guess it's a matter of communication, isn't it? So in this case, the operative said, if you want rid of them, if it helps you, I'll just sling them in the bin. Which he thinks he's being helpful, or she believes they're being helpful, but it's not actually in line with.
Well, there may be an officer that can, help.
Yeah, sorry, Paul Field, Head of Housing and Environment. Obviously, we do investigate working with BIFA any individual instances that occur, but we want to look at the general stuff. There will always be occasions when that might need to happen. So I just wonder whether Fran is manager from BIFA, you might be able to tell us why there might be those odd occasions when that does happen.
Well, that behaviour shouldn't happen, and if we received that complaint, we would investigate it with crews. So, I mean, we would try and correct behaviour so that doesn't happen in future. And we do receive some, sporadic reports similar to that. We perhaps need a bit more detail of when it happened, so we can actually go back to the individuals that were on the vehicle that day and ask them those questions.
Thank you.
Ed, thank you. And then Sue after.
My question's about customer satisfaction and KPTs, because there's quite a lot about it in the report. It's about the four elements of evaluation. The DEFRA code of practice is a good one because that linked to KPT4. So there's something quite measurable there. But in terms of customer satisfaction, a lot of it is about. Well, I couldn't see the responses because obviously that was the click here bit that was missing in the report. It seemed to me anyway. So things about questions to respondents, whether they were satisfied or not satisfied. So you go from very satisfied to completely dissatisfied, and various shades in between, which is great. But I mean, and the scoring matrix is all nicely tabulated, but I'm not sure what it's really getting to, because how can you monitor the progress from that stage?
Yeah.
So I would agree with the statement, which is why we're starting to ask more questions. That are they happy or not happy is something we've kept historically to continue to have continuity over the years and consistency. So we have started, particularly with street cleansing, to ask more detailed questions because we know that's an area where residents do get confused with. So this time we've added in questions about litter bins and street sweeping. When we've asked the questions, we've tried to provide some detail of what that covers for us. Because not every litter bin on the road is our responsibility. It could be town council, it could be a private organisation. And it's the same with roads. Not every road is our responsibility to sweep or business responsibility. So we are trying through our waste surveys to get that detail because it is, you are right, between very satisfied and not very satisfied, there is a big difference. So we're asking more questions.
Thank you. Yes, a brief comment on what Joe was talking about, and then I've got two questions. One set of figures that I never did see was recording the number of days on which hire vehicles are used that haven't got cages for either textiles or the wee stuff. I mean, hopefully the numbers of days when this happens will decline as new vehicles come online, because it's when the old vehicles break down and then hire vehicles of a similar nature can't be used or can't be hired. Anyway, that's really for if anybody wants to collect such figures in future. My two questions. I'm pleased to see that the number of missed bins has improved this year compared with last year. This is paragraph 15. What I'd really like to do is ask if either our officers or BIFA have got, bearing in mind that the future paper that we're going to look at in a moment is on waste strategy going forward, whether they've got any thoughts on the food waste containers we use. I'm aware from my former position that it's food waste containers that get missed more than the two big bins. I mean, it's fairly obvious they're smaller and less obvious. I did sort of jokingly say once we should have some bright pink ones or something like that, so they show up more on the roadside. But I'd be interested to know what BIFA's thoughts are, or indeed our officers, through whoever, on possible things. I mean, it might fit better under the waste strategy conversation.
Well, I'll ask the question and then we can close it down.
Okay, I'll pass it on straight away.
I think
Bigger bins.
I think it probably does fit better under the future waste strategy, because that's obviously looking at what we might do going forward. It's a fair question that I think we pick up, but it might be better.
But it would be useful to have BIFA's, the operatives.
Yeah, well, we'll come to that.
Right.
Your second question, sir?
Right. The second question is on recycling of plastic film. Now, the government did eventually come up with a list of what we've got to do for recycling going forward, and we do almost all of it at the moment, except for plastic film. Now, when I went round Edmonton, I understood, I might have it wrong, that BIFA could actually recycle plastic film. It doesn't count in our figures if they do that, because it's not part of our contract. But I'm wondering how difficult or easy it would be for us to start having plastic film recycled, because from the point of view of a user of recycling, my husband and I still have arguments over which bits of plastic are recyclable and which aren't. I mean, the description soft plastic doesn't, I don't think of any plastic as being particularly soft. I know in days gone by, we used to recycle all plastics except for plastic film, you know, cling film type stuff.
So the question is,
polystyrene. Could we go back to doing something like that?
are they doing it at the moment?
Well, whether they do it, yes.
Are they doing it at the moment? That's the question.
Yeah.
And then you can ask the second bit, will you do in the future, in the next bit, when we do the strategy?
Well, hoping that we could do it before we get round to the.
Okay, so the answer is we don't,
Yeah.
and residents should really take those soft plastics as we described them to most supermarkets now that have got a bin that you can stuff in for recycling. So that's the way to do it. You're right. They are separated out at Edmonton, but it's separated out as mistaken as it's contamination, really, because they shouldn't be in our green bins. The answer is, I guess, of course we could do it, but there would be a cost to it. And I think that would be at the moment the issue that I would say. We have not budgeted for it.
Yeah, but it's not in the moment, but it could be in the future.
Well, it will be in the future. I think it's 2027, the legislation changes and we will have no option but to recycle.
I think my question is, can we do it before then?
Well, I'm
We've got to
guessing,
do it
but
and-
because it's a new requirement, I imagine the council will receive money from the government, similarly to those local authorities that were not recycling food, which will now have to do so. They get money from the government.
So it is. So we're not doing it at the moment. Is there a chance before the new contract of doing it, or not?
Well, I'll leave Paul to answer, but from a political perspective, I would say, can we afford it? When the government almost certainly, I imagine, they're going to have to give us money to take on a new task.
Yeah, we've extended the contract with Biffa through till June 2026, and that includes the handling of materials at Edmonton. If we have a specification and agreement with them for the materials that go in there. If we were going to start collecting plastics in the recycling bin, a number of things would need to happen. Edmonton would need to be able to take it. We would need to be able to have that agreement, and we'd need to be able to afford it. But also, we'd want to make sure that had a communications plan and it was timed in a way that worked. So I'm not going to sit here now and say we're not going to do it in the next 2 years, but to be completely honest, we're looking more about what might happen, particularly with it, as Councillor Coleman said, in 2027 when it becomes a requirement. So we will have to have it by that point. We may be able to do it sooner, but there's a number of factors that we've got to factor in.
Okay. Right.
Oh, thank you.
Jo,
Chair.
carry on.
Super quick, thank you. Firstly, call centre wait times. The KPT was missed. The average wait time is about a minute. I mean, it's not the end of the world, let's be honest. But nonetheless, the performance under that KPT was poor because the target was 35 seconds. And the reason given was because of vacancies and staff illness. And I wonder what Biffa are doing to address that failure.
We've actually increased the call centre operative numbers, and we have fully recruited. So our performance now is much different to it was earlier in the year.
Excellent, thank you. And secondly, survey responses 252. I think that's pretty good going for a waste survey. But because obviously we don't have the granular detail about who those respondents were, we don't know whether they were a town and parish council, 10 town and parish councils, 20 town and parish councils, plus a whole lot of individuals or organisations. We don't know. So in a sense, I think it would be helpful if we could have the detail about who the respondents were, because sometimes giving equal weight to the response of, for example, Henley Town Council, and taking that as a single response and treating it with the same weight as you would treat the response of a single householder, for example. I don't think that's necessarily methodologically the right way to approach a survey. And that's all I say, but we don't know because we don't have the data on who responded and how those responses were treated.
So I don't know whether it is captured, but I imagine there's probably a confidentiality piece that might well put people off from submitting an answered survey.
I'm not suggesting that we name people, but it would be useful to know if we have town and parish councils and organisations responding, they should be given more weight than the response of the individual, or at least we should be aware of what they say.
Yes. There were 10 parish councils that made a complaint. Well, that's heavy compared with there were 10 households.
We're not talking about complaints, are we? We're talking about the survey.
Responses.
The survey responses, yes. Sorry.
That's on it. That's the reason. She does the administers the survey.
Yep, sure.
So the survey is built for residents, so it goes out to residents' forums. If it's put in that way, if councils responded, it would be as an individual for themselves if they live in the district, not or any town council or another town council example. We do ask for, we've started to ask for some detail, but Mark is right. We have to be careful what we ask for due to GDPR and bits and pieces. So we can get the first part of postcode, so we can start going down to area for the first part of postcode.
Catherine.
Thank you, Stefan. So I have a bit of a meta question and then a specific question. So a lot of the questions we're getting are kind of questions about whether or not we can get specific detail. So in paragraph 4, we talk about the review performance and the agreed framework, and that it implies that this agreed framework is the same framework for all of the contracts, the big contract. So my question is really, as a scrutiny committee, or the two parts really. First, how does that review framework get reviewed? And secondly, is it something that as a scrutiny committee we can review as all these contracts come up for renewal, so that we can say, actually, this is the information we want to see on our contracts that would be helpful? Is it possible for us to review the review framework?
So I don't know the answer, so I'm not actually sure it's.
Yes, I think it is. If I just give an officer point of view, I think that first of all, specifically on waste, how we have managed the contracts, as we've said, we've come into this extension period and we're managing very differently. So the structure of how we're doing it is different anyway. I think that the format that we've got here probably doesn't tell the whole picture, and that's part of the reason that some of the things we talked about changed in terms of whether something was fair or good, because I personally don't think that this is giving you as members the correct picture.
And it might be that the questions we ask of GLL are very different to the questions we want to ask of BIFA, so having one kind of one framework, thank you, might be helpful to.
I don't actually know who owns the format for that. Tim, do you have any idea? Is that
Been there a long time.
it's corporate performance, is it?
Yeah, it is the corporate performance team, but I think Councillor Foxall's point is a good one. Looking at that performance framework, that contract management framework would be good, because you've got SABA and GLL's reports to come later in the year. Is the same format the right format for you to scrutinise properly? So that would be something I think you as a committee could reach a conclusion on.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe that's something we could take away.
Yeah.
And then my specific question then is about paragraph 69.
Lee, I'll come to you next.
So paragraph 69 talks about KPIs, including climate objectives. Now, the SEAC committees have papers this week that are suggesting removing or watering down our interim climate commitments and leaving them long-term ones. So my question is really, how can our KPIs include these climate objectives if those targets are being watered down or removed?
I think that's a question for SEAC, not for here. We can only report on the KPIs that are applicable to the contractor.
But I mean, it is in that report, so it is irrelevant.
Well, we've reported on it. They're in there.
I think
If your question is,
I think you're right.
If the target figures are
If
changing,
SEAC changes the target,
Yeah.
then that's got to filter through
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Yeah.
It will be raised in SEAC as well.
Lee.
Couple of questions as regards customer satisfaction and survey. How is that done, and how do we know that it's reasonably randomised and reasonably representative in terms of its responses?
so I think the survey is sent out and advertised, and people, if they wish to submit a response, they can. But I don't think it's targeted per se. Is it? Louise?
No, there's no
We
target.
don't.
So anyone that's signed up to the council's surveys will get an email to say, would you like to take part in the survey? And we also advertise it to residents through social media, through press releases, if we felt we needed a response. So there is no
response
targeting.
rate is that overall?
This year we got the numbers mentioned. Previously we had over 1,000 for the last one, and that was because we did a very heavy comms push on the last one. So we wanted to see the difference. This one actually went out in council tax leaflets. So out of the 120,000 leaflets we sent out, we only got 200 responses.
120,000 across the two councils. The
councils,
one
yeah.
council would have around 60,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that's just an area to think about. We referenced table 1 on page 16, which shows us the recycling rate, and obviously that is very and that's fair enough, because that's how we monitor in terms of this contract. But it did make me wonder whether we do more garden waste than other councils, and if we're comparing with other councils, whether we should also track against other councils, taking the garden waste out and looking at how good we are with the dry recycling and so forth that we achieve relative to others, because that perhaps is a more direct comparison.
So I'll allow the officers to add their bit, but I would say at the moment, because each authority can choose which bits it wishes to recycle. So at the moment, food waste is not mandated, but it will be. Right. Garden waste is not mandated, but you can offer it. So we're not comparing ourselves with other local authorities. That's, I think, it's DEFRA that produced that table. So
right.
So that's it. You know, it's not us falsifying the figures, so to speak.
No, I wasn't beginning.
No. But I agree with you. It is an unfair. You know, what could be seen to be an unfair figure to the one at the bottom of the table who says, but we don't have the facilities for recycling food. Or as Sue would have said, but if she was sat here, we shouldn't be recycling garden waste, we should be composting it. So
well, that's another dimension, isn't it? But, yes, it's just to understand the nuances of the figures.
And when we get onto the new waste strategy, maybe this will come up, because actually seeing high figures for recycling is not necessarily the best thing that we should be seeing. We should be seeing the waste levels go down and the recycling levels go down without putting the tipping up, because that then means people are reusing or reducing, the opposite way around. So
the other thing that occurred to me is whether we do anything to try and change the weather, and it sort of seemed to me that there might be a scope out there to work with an Amazon or somebody and try and look at using click and collect as a model, rather than so that you would have plastic totes going round and round the system, rather than what we have at the moment, which is an enormous amount of cardboard and filling going out and being dumped in our green bins and then going around the system that way. It could potentially take for Amazon a lot of van delivery and packaging cost out of their system, but it would obviously put some cost back into the click and collect centres and the totes that would need to go around, and it might be less acceptable to customers, but it would be just an interesting way of trying to change the weather a little bit.
So let's leave that, I think, to
maybe more the strategy.
For the second one,
I think because I'm not sure the detail, because I don't think we've seen it yet, but that I suspect might come under the extent producer responsibility, where whoever produces the packaging has to pay for it.
Sure.
So therefore, the
incentive of them is to reduce it was what I was looking at, really, for those kind of reasons.
Did you have anything to add on to what I said?
Let's leave that to the next bit. I'm going to ask a question. I'll pop and then Ron, and then afterwards Ron, and then I'll pop the committee on notice that I'm closing this item down in a bit. So if you've got a burning question, you have to come out with it in the next couple of minutes, please. Customer satisfaction on standards of street cleanliness. The question is, does this customer satisfaction include street cleanliness, in other words, sweeping the streets, as well as emptying of street bins? Because certainly I have noticed problems in Henley, let's say, where street bins are being missed. So therefore we are continually having to ask, prompt, nudge.
Right, so the answer is yes, but I'll let the officers give you the detail.
Thank you.
So as part of the survey, there was was for all streets that we do for the survey. But yes, litter bins, if they're ours, the ones that we collect,
yes,
would be part of that. Yeah.
Yes, okay. And because there has been a dip in satisfaction or an increase in dissatisfaction,
There's
are
been
you
movement
aware
in the
of that?
bands,
And
yeah.
have strategies have been put in place to improve that?
Yes, so as part of the waste survey, it's something we would take back with BIFA and go through what has been raised and how, if there are ways we can improve it. So streets would be part of that. Also with the contract extension, we are looking at how we monitor. So there'll be more monitoring of areas, and we can see, you know, trends. If we're getting more requests for litter bins being emptied, we can see there's something happening with the litter bins. And we can view it through that.
Of course, to a certain extent, the fact that you only got 250 responses from 160,000 might be an indication that we're pretty happy with it. So that could be right. Ron, and then Andrew, you wanted to ask a question or not? No. Good. I'm pleased. Thank you. Ron, and then anybody? Sorry, Ron. Anybody else?
Can I just come back on that last point? And I think we have already touched on it.
Yes.
The other thing is household waste collection. Everybody really understands what that is, and it's very clear what service you're getting from the council. As we've talked about with street cleansing and litter bins, there are various owners of litter bins across the public estate, for want of a better word. Then there might be pieces of land that belong to this council, there might be pieces of land that belong to parish council. And so I think it's one of the things that we've recognised in some of the survey responses is often people give a response on street cleansing particularly, where they aren't entirely sure what it is that they're responding. So they might be saying this particular bin isn't being emptied very often, and actually that might not be our bin, or this piece of land is untidy when it might not be our piece of land. That's not to take away, we're not hiding away from the fact that this isn't an area we need to improve on. I think it's just that the public, understandably, might not have as much clarity as they do with waste.
Ron, and then I'm going to close down this item.
Yes. Referring to Dimension 3 council satisfaction, that was fair last year and it's still fair this year. Looking at the figures, I think there's perhaps there's some statistical anomalies there because there aren't that many people responding. But I wonder, are we doing anything to try to improve the relationship between the council and BIFA?
Yes, it is. very simple. Yes, this year there was a very large improvement. Fran, did you want to also mention anything?
Yeah, so we've actually had a change of personnel, which I think has solved a lot of those issues and improved performance, particularly on street cleansing.
We should see a big improvement next year.
That's an improvement.
Sorry if I may, just one further thing. This is looking back at 2023.
Yes.
Obviously, as we're now in 2024, as I said, we moved into a contract extension period, and we actually have a very different model and arrangement with BIFA. So I think we are working much more closely together. So the natural changes mean that should improve.
Right, so this is the BIFA performance review. Members of the committee, do we wish to just straightforwardly accept it, or do you want to accept it with any recommendation?
I was accepted as it is.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so we have a proposal from Sue and seconded by Lee that we propose it as it is, because broadly we're fairly happy to right. So all those in favour of that? Okay, that is okay. We'll have a pause of a minute while we have a change of personnel. But thank you for attending, and thank you for all your hard work. Thank you. Thank you, Francis from BIFA. Well done. You're in the hot seat again, Mark.
Apparently. Didn't duck quick enough.
Right. Okay, well then, right, okay. Okay, moving on to item 10. Waste, resources and street cleaning strategy.
Thank you. So
So, can I ask who you are? I should know, and I apologise.
So William Maxwell, the waste project manager.
Good.
So William's name is at the top of the paper.
All right. Good. Good. Thank you.
So he'll tell you how many T's haven't been crossed. Else is nothing.
All right, William. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Mark, off you go.
Thank you very much, Chair. So waste collection and street cleansing are some of the most important services provided by the councils, as they affect all residents and are continually under the spotlight. This new strategy recognises the importance of these services, but also supports the new legislation designed to reduce packaging and better capture the value from materials previously considered as waste. The strategy extends the principle that what is considered waste needs to be rethought of as a resource, and it references multiple work areas directly related to the waste hierarchy. That's to reduce, reuse and recycle more, which is in keeping with the high performing position of our district. We've already commented on that earlier on about recycling specifically. As a public facing document, the strategy will help guide the councils and support the wider community in continuing to improve. I'm pleased to present the draft waste resources and street cleansing strategy to joint scrutiny and welcome your thoughts. The strategy isn't presented as a finalised version at this stage, and as your views will be built in when the officers produce the final version in preparation for formal approval in September.
Thank you very much. William, would you like to add anything?
Just on the very last point, we'll take notes now, but if you think of things you want to add in, you've got a further week to send us over any more sort of thoughts you have up until 22nd of July.
Okay. So a chance to shape the future. Okay, we'll take Sue then, Lee.
Thank you.
First, Sue. Thank you.
Yeah, my initial reaction to this was much too long, but in fact I found it really interesting reading through this lot, so I can't suggest how you shorten it at the moment. I've got quite a lot of comments, but I'll start by talking about the actual paper, given that it's going to go to cabinet and might be some scope for doing it. Page 58. Now let me see. It might be called something else. Here, there's a summary of national government changes.
Yeah.
I couldn't read it, which is why I ended up printing the whole lot out, because I thought I might be able to read it if I put it on a bit of paper. And it's all full of initials. And as a general comment on our comms, will people please learn that pale writing on not very dark paper is not good. The best thing to read is either black on white or black on yellow. And I wish that as a council we would adopt that as a standard and not have it these funny coloured bits that nobody can read. Another thing about reading things, page 66.
There was also no table to give you the clue to all of the mnemonics that we used there.
Right.
Yeah.
That I can't read either, but that's the circular things.
Yeah.
But would ask there that the labels are actually bigger. There's no reason why those boxes can't be bigger, so you could read them and it wouldn't matter, what else was there. Thank you. Sorry, that's just being picky because it's on the paper. I have a question on page 60. It says this at the bottom, there is enthusiasm for text, email and other online communication methods, and there's some support for revisiting bin configurations. Can you just tell us what you meant by that? I mean, is that, well, you tell me what.
So we have a system whereby you have a certain sizes of different kind of bins to take different materials, and depending what happens in the probably medium to long term, after the introduction of a deposit return scheme, after the extended producer responsibility has an impact on the sorts of materials we're collecting, we may think about the sizes, shapes and usages of our bins.
Oh, right,
So
okay.
I think that's what's referenced.
Fine. Okay, well, that leads very nicely into my next point, which is on page 48. I very much like this extended upside down triangle, you know, the waste hierarchy, because we always used to have it's got more lines in it and it makes much more sense. And the whole paper, I'm really pleased with the direction in which we're moving. Thank you very much. Right, I wonder if anybody else wants to go now, because that's my sort of picky bits for this. And
Sorry, can I just
carry on?
Just in terms
And
of
then
the
Lee
design.
will come in.
So first of all, I'm sorry if there was anything in the papers that you've got for this meeting that was unreadable. So I apologise for that. But the whole design
No,
is still to get
you don't need to apologise. This is a draft document.
Yeah.
But we lob in comments so that it improves
So
the
the
substance and the style.
The things that you pointed out as Cooper will not be like that in final versions.
Right, okay, but I mean, what, just to finish, can I just finish on that?
So you said you'd finished.
Well, I've just realised.
Go on then.
This triangle, upside down triangle, I like the waist
Yeah, you've already
hierarchy.
said that's lovely.
Yes, but we could think again about the colours and try and relate them more. I've got quite a lot to say on bins later on, but it might be an idea to think about the colours in there.
But we should, yeah. So we could definitely look at it, but bear in mind this is a way of getting the text into an area. It's actually the graphic design, which is what we think most people will be using. And what I wouldn't want to do is try and start. I think what you were saying is maybe where we talk about recycling, make that green because we use green bins, but we might not do post 2026 when we get to the new contract. So
yeah.
Okay, Lee.
Couple of quick points on that thing that Sue raised on page 58. Can we just have a glossary, please, of all of those sets of letters attached to this, that it just explains what they mean? And I think that would help readers generally. Small comment on the commercial. We've ruled out commercial lock, stock and barrel, and I think that's right in terms of the traditional roll top, specifically commercial bins, but I don't think we should automatically exclude, say, small shops and businesses who might use domestic sized bins that would be entirely compatible with what we already do. So I just make that small point. I think that we're going to face some major cost challenges with our new waste strategy, and that when we come to contract renewal, this is going to be financially quite challenging for us. And therefore, I think we have to look for efficiencies and productivity in what we do. I also think that possibly some of the aspects of sortation could become more expensive, but that depends on exactly how it is done. For me, I would like us to look at a 3-week type strategy. I would say change the green bins from 240 to either 360 if we're going to bundle them all together as we do now, or split them into 2 180s, putting metal and glass in one and paper and card and plastic in the other. And I'm given to understand that automatic outsortation of those two things is fairly good, so that once we've got that stream flowing, that there might be better ways of doing an Edmonton or whatever to get the outputs. And of course, if that works, it will also result in less contamination of our waste. So we'll get better recycling and better value recovery potentially from that. The grey bins I would take from, say, 180 to 240. I'm not sure, because of the weight that the brown bins take, whether we could go from 240 to 360 there. It might be a step too far for weight. But the point about all of this is that for every bin tug and bin lift, you've got a 50% efficiency by taking them over 3 weeks. And therefore, you've got much more efficiency of manpower, much more efficiency of vehicle usage. And when you look at routing, the tree with the stem and the crown will be much compressed, because you're picking up more weight, more cube per bin lift, and therefore where you're getting to is a much more compact route, and therefore more flexibility, I think, in the whole system.
All great points. But what we're trying to do with this as a strategy is put it at the highest level, such that we're not being prescriptive by by the solution. What you're talking really about is the solution that we go in 2026.
I'm suggesting one which we should look at. I agree with you. I don't want to be prescriptive and close down other avenues. I'm just saying that this is the kind of thing that I think we ought to include within our thinking to evaluate. And there might be some compelling reason no, which I haven't thought through here. But I think, I don't actually think 3 weeks rather than 2 weeks is going to cause any major problem in terms of the driving
or reference in the future. Yes, okay.
But if I can just say, I mean, officers could correct me if I'm off piece here, but what we want with the strategy is not to get into that sort of level of detail, which it is detailed, but it should be there for the 2026 follow-on contracts.
Sorry, that's where I'm going to with that. Yes, and it's all the cost is not a trivial.
Of course, absolutely, 100%.
So obviously the principles remain, which is we've got to do something with the budget. It's got to be legally achievable. It's got to help hit our carbon targets.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of principles we're working towards, which means that there's all kinds of configurations which may make an important difference against those metrics, which we can look at in the future as part of our annual planning process.
Yes, hopefully the government don't rule out 3 week consideration.
Well, so as you probably read in here, 321 at the moment, this legislative guidance says we can't do 3 weeks, that we need to.
But hopefully we've got a new look.
You would like to think they would look at it and go, actually, that would cut down on the carbon footprint significantly.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
You have another one, Lee?
No, that was the main thrust. Those
we go Ed, Andy, and Catherine. Ed.
Okay, so first of all, on the summary of national government changes, that thing on page 59 isn't great, although I've noticed it's on page 93 as well, and it's much better set out there. And also picking up on Lee's point as well, the glossary of terms is key, because it took me ages to work out what all those were. And the waste hierarchy, great. But you've covered that already, so that's fine. I had a question about deposit return scheme. That's very good as well. And I note that that's going to potentially reduce the amount of recycling that goes into the bin. So I think that's going to be great for Lee's point about reducing the frequency of collections and so forth. And also glass is coming out of that, from what I've read as well. Glass is coming out of the recycling stream because that often breaks into. I'm sorry, I'm getting to a question now. Right. So I suppose it's about really the sort of returns on this, because I picked up on a little statement in page 55. Recycling markets were buoyant, helped by demand of the UK's recyclable material, largely from engineering and manufacturing countries, in particular China. So obviously, reading from that statement is that that's either no longer the case or may not be the case in the future. So I'm just wondering whether, from Biffa's point of view, is that a case of striking a balance between what you charge the customer, i.e. the council, and what you can get back in terms of revenue stream?
Yeah. So there's two factors for where we take our materials from the dry mix recycling bin to. One is that it costs money for them just to process it. They tip it all out and have to, separate off the plastics from the different types of plastics, from the metals and the glass and the plastic films and the paper from the cardboard. And it's quite expensive and quite energy intense operation, for which we pay a gate fee for material. We then get back as a second charge how much those materials are worth on the open market. So there's an income stream for us. Unfortunately, you are right that the income stream does not cover the costs for the collection and for the processing of the material. It gives us a rebate, but those costs can dwindle depending on the position of international markets, even though we don't export the material in any way like we used to, which is probably a good thing. There's fairly buoyant domestic markets, but the income streams are not massive. So we're constantly looking at that. It's under evaluation all the time. What's the best deal we can get for the councils to maximise the amount of materials captured and we know it's recycled against the cost of having to do that?
Andy.
I've got there's a lot of really good stuff in there, and there are about 5 things I wanted to praise, but I've got 2 notes of caution, so I'll butter you all up by doing the nice bits first. I can't read my own writing. Lagoons.
It's because you have great difficulty in writing buttery up comments.
Yes, I cannot do that.
Not good at praise.
Yes.
Let's just get to the meat of it then.
Okay, so yeah, supporting bring and take events, brilliant. The loan store, that's what I wrote. Very much like that. Glass removal separately from experience, yes, that's very useful to have. And the better, more information and the better capturing of textiles, batteries and wee items, whatever wee items are.
Toasters, electrical.
Yeah.
Waste electrical, electronic equipment.
Because there are times when my wife just cringes and says, Andy, you can't put that in there, and tells me where I can put them. And I'm not that dumb, but I do have difficulty sometimes. But the 2 notes of caution, although I know it's received praise here, I think the 3-2-1 strategy could get a lot of blowback. People will get pissed off at 3 weekly stuff. There are still people who are very annoyed at 2 weekly. Going to 3 weeklies for anything is going to cause some angst. So the note of caution is to prepare people for it in advance as much as possible and get them used to the idea if we are going that way. And the other one is revisiting side waste and second bin policies and overflowing expectations. Talking about some people abusing the system by presenting bins that are overflowing. Not every household is the same size. I'll just give the example of my house and my next door neighbour. My next door neighbour is a lovely little old lady. She does not generate as much waste as we did when we had 7 adults living in the house. My brother-in-law, my children who have reached adulthood, one of them with a partner, and myself and my wife. We did struggle sometimes to fit everything in the bin system, and we weren't deliberately abusing it. So we have to bear in mind that whilst we do scale to the household, we have to give some flexibility for larger households. I don't know exactly how you can do it, but at the strategy level is where you should be thinking it. So I thought, those are the just. Apart from that, I really, really like this. As I say,
Andy, pause there. Any comments?
Yeah, I'll just pick on both of those. In terms of any kind of bin change, any kind of frequency change, you're right. It can be painful in the short term, whatever you do, but also history, and this is something that's happened in local authorities up and down the land. Within about 6 months, people have gone back to. So if you go around most parts of the country and say to people, "Do you like the way that you have your waste collected here?" People go, "Yes, I really like it here," but that might be all very different because it's what people got used to. That doesn't make it not true, what you've said. What I'm saying is that over time, it goes back.
We need to prep people and get them.
I think the other thing then about size of bins is just to pick up, again, it's a fair point. The key for me with what we're trying to do in this strategy is recognising that if we're going to change how waste resources happen in our districts, this is a community-wide piece of work. This isn't just about what the council does, it's about what every household does, how every household can do their piece to minimise waste and help. Now, we will help individual houses, so some houses have bigger families than others, so we can look at individual bins. But on the broadest scale, it's about what is it that schools and businesses and the council, we've got to play our part, but the community as well, and everybody can play their part. And that's what we're trying to get to in this strategy.
Lovely. Catherine, and then it's Andrew and Joe, and then we'll come back to it. So Catherine, then Andrew. Please.
Thank you. I do want to pick up on this 3 weekly one again, because I do actually disagree with what's just been said. There are loads of examples around the country where the 3 weekly thing is being done really successfully. And I wonder if we could have a change of framing within this strategy, where we talk about, well, we might think about 3 weekly, but it's kind of being we're not sure whether we'll be allowed to. I think we should be very proactive and say 3 weekly is something we'd like to do. Here are all the places around the country where it's been done really well. There's even a Mumsnet discussion which says about how 3 weekly bin collection is fine. The key point about it is if you don't have food waste in your bin, it's not smelling, so it's fine. And there's other things being taken out. So I think we could maybe change just the framing of that aspect of the strategy to say there's lots of examples of 3 weekly being done. We'd like to do it. We are going to have to see what the legal kind of national government context is. So that would be my 2p's work on that. So East Hertfordshire has got an amazing
So do you want a response on that?
FAQ. You can, yeah, sorry, that wasn't a question.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, if you're going to make a recommendation, but the paper gets changed, I think you need a response. But if you're not going to make a recommendation, then
I mean, 2 things, and one of them we've touched on. Obviously, the work through this has been happening for some time, and the events of the last 6 or 7 weeks, in terms of now we've got a different government.
Yeah.
It's what we've clearly set out is whatever we do must be legal. At the moment, the government's guidelines is that they will not support any local authorities moving from 2 weekly refuse beyond that. So we wouldn't recommend to officers wouldn't be recommending to councillors to change something which was against, of course, the law. Now that might change. New government might change that, and you know we're working on what's happened in the last few weeks. If that was to change, and that was something then that we could come back to councillors and say this is now possible, and this is what it looks like. So we're not anti doing that, but we have to work within what the guidelines are.
Yeah.
But that was the point I was going to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because ultimately, I think this comes down for me to sign it off, and I like you guys, but I'm not going to be in prison.
No, but clearly, but what I mean, thank you, William, for your comment earlier. You sent me a link, and it does. There is a big header at the top of every gov.uk page now, which says this was passed under the Sunak Conservative government. Like, it's all holding, but hopefully it will change.
And it may come to that page where we've got lots of acronyms in there, but it may be that some of those the target dates will they might get thrown out completely. Hopefully not, but the target dates may change.
Yeah,
because it was only changed to simpler recycling was 9 months ago.
Well, yeah,
yeah. So
okay. So I do have a specific question then, which is on something different, which is on page 69. We talk about bulky waste items currently going to landfill.
Yeah.
Straight to landfill. Do not pass go. Do not collect £200. I was slightly surprised by that, particularly if the bulky waste items include things like fridges and washing machines that could go to scrap metal merchants, for example.
Yeah, so bulky waste actually goes to 3 locations currently. So electricals would go on to electrical recycling, so they are collected separately. POPs, which is persistent organic pollutant materials, so sofas have to be anything domestic seating that has flame retardant material has to be incinerated. It has to be collected very carefully on the incineration. The remainder that is left does go to landfill currently. We try to encourage people as much as possible to actually find another home for reduce and reuse. So charity shops we advertise. We say, recycle, things like that. And then it's a very small amount that still goes to landfill, but it does still go there.
I mean, what's the landfill? It's less than 2%, isn't it?
It's less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Yeah, 1% it is.
So I mean, clearly we would prefer to be nothing, but actually less than 1% of all household waste going to landfill, I think is.
Oh yeah, no, that's really good. It was just a bit of a surprise, but it seems like actually the situation is more complex than that statement in the report, and perhaps the strategy. Maybe there could just be a little bit more gloss on that in the strategy, so that people like me go, what am I going to do with my fridge then? Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, Andrew, and then Joe, and then Ed, then Lee. Andrew.
What I find most frustrating about the whole recycling business is that the stuff you buy isn't marked. And obviously it's not marked because people sell stuff nationally, and what you can and can't recycle is still a local decision. So in terms of the strategy, I wonder whether we could think also about part of our strategy being to lobby government for some sort of consistent way that councils can map onto packaging and so on, so that it would be possible to mark on everything what should be done with this. So I mean, I'm not going to try and do this, but you know, if you've got a Class A council, this is recyclable. If you've got, you know, whatever, there must be a way to do it, and we should spend money getting government.
Yeah. So I think in part the answer will be the simpler recycling that's coming in. So the extended producer responsibility. So because it's been, if you like, taxed, presumably it's therefore marked up, but it's, you know, so I think we will get, this was previous government obviously wanted consistency. So you didn't have to worry about if you put a glass bottle in your recycling, if everybody would be recycling this to the same standard. So I think that would get to your point there.
Okay, but but I didn't want the point to be down there. In a way, the point should be, should we also be trying to lobby national government to give to make it a complete working system? Unless you're going to tell me it is going to be a working system.
Yes, I think so. So the aim, councillor, is that when they introduce a consistent set of materials that all councils will be obliged to collect as recycling, that those materials will then be labelled in the shops as collected and recyclable at the curbside in your district, and that will be universal across England. So there is a tying together of those two things.
And in terms of the way the government's going to bring that in, is that a testable? I mean that's great, but is it really going to work like that? And if it doesn't, can we have a bit of what our strategy is to raise stink about it if it doesn't work? Do you understand? Make your point. It's easy. It would be so easy for the government to say, "Oh, we've done it," but actually, it doesn't work because
Can we try and influence sensible government policy?
That's part of the strategy.
That's part of the strategy. Question mark.
I think we can certainly consider it. I'm not sure that the answer is we can, but why not consider it? Yeah.
The reason that, Andrew, that was going to be my question on it, because at the county council, we have appointed now a lead officer to, I'm not suggesting we do this in the Vale or the South. We've just appointed a lead officer to look upwards to government and be the link between government. Lots of other councils have them, so that we try and influence the policies that are going to happen. And I think certainly on changing waste strategy is certainly something we should be saying, because we've got brilliant experience in South Oxfordshire. You go around the country and people say, yeah, the South Oxfordshire system is the best in terms of the colour-coded bins. And if we're going to, so therefore we do have expertise and experience to actually shout to government and say, look, this is the system and this is what we would like you to consider. So it's really, I think it's a take it away and think about it.
I think
kind of thought.
Yeah,
yeah,
we engage in lots of different ways. Obviously through the LGA, there's various different groups. I don't want to give acronyms, but so there's LARAC, which is Local Authority Recycling, and then there's through waste disposal groups as well, and also through our partners in Oxfordshire. So we are tied in, and the industry is tied into government very closely. So I think that our particular experience is fed in, as well as the experience of local authorities is fed into this. But it's a fair point to say we need to see how this legislation is actually rolled out, and then see what happens in reality, and there might well be some learning for everybody from that.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. Gosh, it's nice, isn't it, to see polluter pays principles being adopted by government, because so often it's individuals being told, it's on you to, when in fact people often don't have a choice. They're forced to buy stuff that's riddled with packaging, and then it's councils and individuals that are expected to pick up the tab. But I'm glad that finally polluters are being forced to contribute. I just wondered, on page 73, we've got some success targets. And I wondered, how did we arrive at those targets? 70% of Is that what it is? I think I'm going to look for it.
Yeah.
Or you know it by heart, probably.
So recycling figure is it for currently, yeah.
Yeah, 7.
So just 75 to 2030.
Yes, exactly. I wonder where those targets came from. How did we arrive at those targets? Beg your pardon. Recycling rate of 70% by 2030. Reduction contamination of dry mixed recycling from 8% to 5%. And then the public better understands the onward journey of collective recycling. Where those?
So for the first one, the 70%, the governments have suggested, well, they suggested 50% for councils by 2020. If you remember that was missed, unfortunately.
Yeah. We made it though, didn't we?
We absolutely,
smashed it. Yeah.
So the government target is 65% by 2030, should be 60% by 2020. They've got the rest, they've got a sliding scale. This is a stretch target, so we've got 5% of the government's ambitions.
All I would say is that I think in South we're on what, 62?
Yeah.
So to go up to 70, I wonder if we're being too modest in our ambitions.
Absolutely.
Should we not be more ambitious?
There's two things to add very quickly to say on that. Okay. So one is it is diminishing returns, so that last 5% is much harder than if you're on 40% getting up to 50.
Yeah.
So secondly, I'm just always optimistic that we can excel that target. I think it's a genuine target, and I like to think that that's something we could actually work towards and achieve. If we set it too high, it may just feel like we're missing what we set out to do. So, sorry, Councillor.
I'm happy for Sue to jump in, Chair, if I think she wanted to jump in on that.
Well,
Shortly, Sue.
okay, yeah, I put comments against that, and in fact, from the point of view of this paper, I would just leave out, well, say increased recycling rate without putting any numbers, because to me, recycling rates are not well defined. I mean, all this business of whether you've got garden waste in or not, and other things, but we want to up the recycling rate. You say it's 70% there. I can remember when South used to recycle more than 70% because that's how it was defined when we first started doing it. You must remember we were one of the first councils in the country to ever have recycling because we started in 1995-6. And so, you know, that's all to do with definition. So leave out the numbers and certainly leave out the bit that says through reducing the amount of recycling rejected at the MRF from 8% to 5%.
I'm going to totally disagree with you, Sue.
Well, no,
I think we should be more ambitious on the numbers.
No, well, but if you know what they are, how they're defined, it's the definition of what that's the problem, not having wrong numbers. But
yeah,
I've got another comment on that particular page.
I'm still doing my bit.
On the thing about percentages. So
let's just deal with the numbers.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
debate that.
So as you just heard, it's good reasons why 70%.
Yeah.
But actually, I want us to fail to meet that 70%.
Why?
Because I want us to be reusing
Well, yeah.
and reducing.
Yeah.
So actually, success is not really that we're recycling more. I mean, inevitably we will end up recycling more.
Yeah.
But you know, if we're having the waste deposit scheme come in, bottle deposit scheme, then that's going to reduce the amount because we do.
Well, the glass will be out.
But the glass is not included in it, unfortunately. I mean, that now come back to Andrew's point. You know, I would love us to be lobbying the government and saying, well, why are we not including bottles? I mean, they're doing German.
Yeah, and in Australia.
I think we have to be nuanced, other things being equal, because the point's been made about producer responsibility, the point we were discussing earlier about Amazon, you're making the point about reuse. There's a number of moving pieces here that could make it quite complicated. So I think we have to give ourselves a little bit of wriggle room there, depending on the circumstances that present themselves.
I guess I think
No,
I guess that's why I was saying this. If this is as it is currently directed,
fine.
Yeah.
Then let's go with what's directed. But if we don't achieve it, and we can demonstrate clearly that we are not increasing the amount of waste, genuine black bin waste.
Is that a target? Is black bin waste reduction, is that in the targets?
But the target ought to be waste minimisation.
Is that in the targets?
No, we could add something in around waste minimisation.
I think, thinking about the first paper we just saw, and we had the figures for total waste, total recycling. In 2020, it all went through the roof because everyone was sitting at home ordering everything on Amazon and eating their way through COVID. And then now things have come down again. We actually want targets for the total volume of waste, or even waste per resident, waste per household. Yeah, waste per household coming down.
Yeah.
That's more important, really, isn't it, than seeing recycling rates go up? Because if overall rates of waste go up, we're still slinging more stuff out, aren't we? Which is the opposite of what we want to be doing. So it'd be good to have targets for waste per household reduction.
And then this is where the comment's already been made. This is not just something that the council, will drive. This is everybody's responsibility. So hopefully people will move away from picking out the vegetables that are in green packaging, plastic bags, and they'll use their recycled bag.
And Chair, just one more very quick comment, if I may, or two. Obviously, when we're talking about events, licensing, we can hopefully liaise with other departments within the council to drive this forward. So, for example, if we're licensing events, we should be thinking about, can we make a requirement, a condition of the license, that they are not producing gallons, litres, tonnes of plastic waste that we have to deal with, or I don't know which is it. So I think we could use our licensing powers there. And I think that would apply working across the council, really. We think about all the areas in which waste impacts, including procurement and so on. And finally, page 75, litter, roadside litter. I know we've talked about this before, and we know the reasons why not, but CCTV, ANPR, it's being used or trialled by other councils. I don't know if it would work here, but I do wonder if there is scope for us to be employing ANPR to tackle some of the slinging of rubbish out the car window on some of our busy roads.
So leave that for the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Think about that. Ed.
Okay.
And I think we'll have another 5 minutes on this. That's okay. It's really good and important.
Okay, as quick as possible then. Page 51, but also page 73. There's talk about the use of waste sacks for properties where they're unable to use wheelie bins. And also 73 waste recycling options at shared facilities, because it seems like that's quite an issue for areas where you've got flats and shared bins and so forth. And I just wonder whether any other options are being considered, because space is going to be an issue. But I've seen these subsurface things before. I don't know if they've got them in this country, but I know I've certainly seen them where the whole tank sits below ground and people can put all their waste and recycling in all of those, and then they come along and pick it up and take it away. Seems nice and clean and idealistic, but just wonder whether that could be an option at all.
Are you talking for future developments, or are you talking about?
Well,
because I suspect it's going to prove to be very expensive to retrospectively fit.
Yeah, I suppose it is future development. Yeah, I suppose it's about the planning system, because I noticed 73
we
talking about the planning system.
We have looked into the cost of that in the Henley on Marketplace, and it was so exorbitant we couldn't do it. But your point is valid about domestic waste. That Henley town centre is littered with bins on a Wednesday, sacks because they've been put out. So if there was a communal bin that 10 flats can put in and it's picked up by Biffa, question mark.
My understanding is predominantly that is the case. I think the sacks sort of thing, as an example, I'm sure there are hundreds of others. Perhaps if people live in a terrace of houses, with their houses straight onto the street, there's no room to store a hard bin, a green bin or a black bin. You can't get it through the house from the back garden, so therefore they're issued with sacks.
Yeah, and also in a situation where you've got 10 flats, for example,
right?
It's kind of lunacy to give them 10 black bins and 10 green bins,
Yeah, but quite often they will have a communal, so they have the big Biffa. But what I think the city would argue this that where communal bins are used, perhaps people are not quite as judicious about separating out their waste. So they you know, there can be second and third order effects of something that sounds like a good idea actually then becomes detrimental to achieving what we were trying to do, which is get people to reduce their waste. Yeah, good behaviours actually. It's all good behaviours really, I think. Yeah.
There was a long answer on the underground bins, which perhaps isn't appropriate here, Chair, but I'm happy to send you, and perhaps Scott Williams, the manager, would help out inform that. Because yes, they are used elsewhere. I'm not sure how appropriate it is. There's a whole infrastructure has to go with them, like new vehicles that can pick them up and everything else. So, but I'll send you something separately if that's okay.
Councillors, any final questions or comments? Ed?
Also, I've sort of slightly felt the pain a little bit reading the report about the use of food bins and how there's not been, well, my impression was that the take up of that isn't as good as perhaps it could be. So presumably there's still a certain amount of contamination in the waste to energy bins, so forth. So I don't know whether is there anything that can be done to promulgate that into the
No, let's hear the officers and then you can log that in as a question.
We'd welcome any suggestions that neighbours may have as to how we can improve the capture of food waste. Absolutely.
So,
probably about a year ago, Hertfordshire, I don't know if it's the county or the districts or both, did a survey of bins and what people had thrown in them, and they found that for food waste was put in, well, whether it's in separate caddies, they have a system like ours, or in the black bins or whatever. But a good 50% of what was thrown in those bins was actually perfectly edible. And I very much hope that Oxfordshire would do something similar. I did mention it at Oxfordshire Waste Partnership meetings. And they've had a big campaign in Hertfordshire as a result, trying to get people to be more selective on what they do with their food waste. I mean, I never put a food waste bin out. I don't have food waste. And I was only discussing with people the other day what our grandparents used to do. They certainly didn't have food waste bins. Nobody could afford to waste food. So I think that's why I was so pleased to see so much in this strategy on educating people more on what to do with their waste. So I hope that if people do feel inclined to throw food waste out, then yes, by all means put it in your small caddy, but there shouldn't be that much.
Lee, just a very quick one. We talked a bit about bin configurations and frequencies and so forth, and I would hope in the post-26 sort of journey that we might look at some pilots in which we actually just try some different ideas and learn the lessons and work with Biffa to do that, so that we feel less angst and risk about pressing the big nuclear button when it comes to it, and that we feel a bit more confident about that.
I think what I'd say is that the biggest thing is the communications piece, and I would value things like, this is where we're trying to change people's behaviour. So perhaps on a website there is a series of recipes that you can use you can dig into to use your waste, what you would normally throw away, but actually you could make something with it. The more information you give people, the better chance you have of being able to cut the milk going into the bin.
Final bit.
One bit, and I think in that regard, we have an obligation as a council to lead the way and to show people what could be done. I think we should be aiming to be a zero waste council, which would include making low waste or zero waste one of our conditions of procurement. And we should be, instead of feeding ourselves when we have events or whatever, food from the whatever, there's Waste to Taste, which is a local caterer that uses food waste. I mean, we should be doing all of this ourselves and then making a big song and dance about it to tell our residents that it can be done. That's my view. We've got plastic cups out there. We should be looking at ourselves and then telling everybody what we're doing as well. So I would like to see us being a flag waver as a zero waste council. So councils are.
Can I have another go? Because I've got quite a lot more points, or would you rather I wrote them?
I'll let you have one more and I'm going to wrap it up soon.
Okay.
And yes, please do write your comments,
Right.
and in fact, all councillors in the next week.
The 321 collections, I've started working out, you know, on weeks, how many bins you'd have to put out. And it's actually very confusing, given that you have a food waste bin every time. But some weeks you'd have
Do that
one.
no, hang on. I'm going to stop you.
Okay.
That is detail. Certainly, if you've worked out a system that is brilliant, log it in an email
Well,
to,
as a result
to
of it
them.
looking on,
Yes. Yes.
I really laughed on page 71 about the, or was it 73, about the glass, because when we initially had recycling, we didn't include glass, and I spent years explaining to people why you didn't put glass in with the recycling, because it wouldn't be nice having broken glass all over this. And then suddenly, under a new, when I wasn't in administration, we put glass back into it and to take it out. But I'm
And all those lovely bottle banks went that we all used as therapy things.
But actually, in order to make the 3 weekly thing more sensible, I would like a system where we have 3 different bins, 3 different colours. We keep the green and the black because we don't want to chuck them all out, but have something like a blue one which has glass and metal.
I will stop you soon.
Okay,
you are going to become our champion of design from the joint scrutiny.
The other sort of end of this is what happens to the recyclate, and working more with the county because they dispose of stuff. I was a bit disappointed. One of the things I really like is to look for local markets for the recyclate that we collect, and see what local producers of whatever would like us to pull out, and it will be a county-wide thing.
I think that's a new point.
Yeah. Okay. One final thing.
You got your final there. That was your second one.
Well, I know, but I'm
Go on.
leaving
I know.
condensing it.
I know.
Okay. Page 75 on the I think that was to do with litter and fly tipping. And it follows on from what's been said about the increase in fly tipping. What I like using Fix My Street to put things on. I asked that we could do that for this council, and the answer was no, because the systems don't fit, etc. And so we're supposed to be having a new system here, which I don't know whether it comes up. I shall ask another similar question when we get to the update on transformation. But I was looking at Fix My Street today, and it's, could we ask the county to put an initial bit in, just saying, is it to do with water or sewerage? If so, click the link, go to Thames Water and sort it out. Is it to do with litter and fly tipping? If so, come to the county, to the districts and sort it out. And at the moment, there isn't such a link on the county site, because if you've got the misfortune to be reporting something on a footpath rather than on a road, you go through some other horrendous system that takes forever to reply, the countryside one. So they obviously can filter things in that way. So it's just 2 more blobs.
I'll take that away as a county councillor.
Thank you.
Fix My Street doesn't actually belong to any of the
No.
councils. It's independent.
No, but yeah, I mean, the council's obviously got something in there. To
So
work
I'm
with
going to
countryside.
pause you for the moment.
Okay.
Sorry. Can I ask you, because I think you've made a really good point, and then I am going to stop the conversation. Sue said an excellent point about, are we investigating recycling locally?
So that does come up each time that we look at the contract. So we talked about that when we were looking at the extension for BIFA. So it will be looked at, but it will be looked at for the 2026 follow-on contract.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Including where the MRF is,
Right.
etc. But to some degree, you know, we are hamstrung by where the facilities are.
Yeah.
Because we can't, for example, we couldn't afford to build.
Well, if you look locally,
we will,
and you can't do it, that's fine. You've at least looked, which is the important thing.
So,
committee, I'm looking for a proposal, and I think this proposal will be a welcoming of the report. I think I'll take that as read. I think we were all very impressed with it, but there are some things that we have asked to be thought about and included, because this is a draft and it's I don't think this is the kind of thing that the joint committee is saying, please do it. We are politely saying, think about it. And the first one was, which was Sue brought up, the first one was just make sure that the font is clear so that the presentation of the document is good. The second thing would be, and please committee correct me on if I've got any of this wrong. The second thing would be, if you are going to prepare people for change, then you need education and communication, and especially if you're going to go to.
Stefan, I think we should include the glossary in with that. You talked about the readability, but also
readability and the glossary. Yeah, okay. Can leaders. Yeah, well done. And if you're going to introduce change, you need preparation and education, especially if we're going to go to a 3-bin system. We're not at the moment because the legislation doesn't allow that, but we are preparing for this document. Have a think about whether you should include recycling numbers, 70% as a target in there, or committee members might want to beef that up, but and maybe include the reuse a percentage target to do it. Licensing was Joe's point, that when we are giving out licenses, maybe we should include that the fact that an operation should have non-plastic and recyclable cups, knives, forks, etc. And I agree with Joe on this. We should have something in there to try and seriously tackle roadside litter. A movable CCTV with AMPR facility hidden in a bush, so that we can, the road going out of Hamley, the Fairmile Road, is a perfect place for that. At least what I think we're saying as a committee, investigating. That's all we're saying at the moment.
I didn't really get the chance to give an answer to that question. So
in a moment you can. I'll let you. And do we want to include Joe's point about being a zero waste council in our operation?
So that's a good
example.
An aspiration. Yeah. So an aspiration to be a zero waste council. And the final one, I don't know whether I've included this, Candida will correct me, to investigate recycling locally so that we can reduce our global footprint.
And that implies the sortation, in effect, the sortation that would facilitate.
Yes.
When you talked about those percentages, you said waste minimisation.
Yes, the key one was waste reduction targets.
Waste
reduction,
which
is almost more important really than recycling.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Got that, Lee?
I mentioned the small commercial. I'd just like to think that we will include those, the thought about those, if they're bins that are compatible with our system. So we were ruling out in the report commercial generally, the big roll top bins that are not compatible with us, but where there are smaller shops and whatever that are capable of having smaller bins, they may be a viable prospect.
I think it's fair to point out that there's a real challenge around that, because having a selectively small number of limited locations to which lend themselves better for the needs for a private firm service, it's logistically quite tricky for us. There's also risks attached to taking on the bin contracts for the private sector. So I'm just flagging up that there is a big piece of work there that if we wanted to name check it as something to investigate, it's something that would have to be considered for the future. It's not something we can look positively at very easily. Because we have done quite a lot of research in that, particularly I say Scott, who's the environment manager, is on the call here. We've looked at it together. So I just, that's one of those ones about all that full list I'd be a bit wary about.
We don't at the moment.
Yeah.
As part of our contract pickup.
Isn't it something to do with the legal definition of, the waste figures we give have to be for domestic basis?
I think we need to look at that a bit more before including it, because I know that we in Henley we have a problem with business waste. That there are 4 operatives, and we're about to tackle it. Well, try and tackle it again because I've tackled it before, but that's got nothing to do with, I think, this bit. Okay. have we captured most of thoughts in that? Yeah.
Just on, thank you, Chair, just on the licensing point, that was, thank you, that was an example, I guess, of working across the council, across all the areas of the council to embed waste in all areas, including procurement, for example. So licensing was one.
This policy should feed into other areas of the council.
Yeah.
For example,
Planning, licensing,
yeah,
you know, the list goes on. Yeah, procurement.
Okay. Right.
I think Mark was going to.
He will in a moment. He will in a moment.
I might not show it.
So what we're going to do, we're going to accept that thing that I've just said. That we are happy with it, and Candide has captured the wording that we've gone through that list. Because it's good. We've had a good debate. And we're done. So I'd like to have a vote on that. Are we in favour of accepting the report and with the additional comments that all those in favour? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. And now, Mark, you can.
So the littering out of a vehicle come under moving vehicle regulations, and you have to be specifically licensed or authorised to use those. And as I understand at the moment, neither South nor Vale come under those. The reason I know that is because it's part of the parking and traffic regulations outside of London. At the moment, there's a stall on getting authorities licensed to do so. And I can't remember what the stats are. It's something like 30% of those that have applied have been told they've got to wait. So it's something you have to apply to do. Otherwise, you're not licensed. Licensed is probably not the right word. You don't have any legal rights, the same as applying fixed penalty notice in car parks. You have to be authorised to do so. So it's not quite as straightforward as putting a CCTV camera out, fortunately.
Okay, right. Right, that concludes.
Oh, sorry, and by the way, if you do have that licensing, a private vehicle with a dash cam can be used as evidence.
Another private vehicle that spots
Yes.
you slinging your Maccas
Yes.
out the window. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Well, all I can say, Mark and William, thank you very much for the report, and thank you for your attendance and your constructive comments. So that's good. Thank you. Well done. Good. Yeah. Right, we're moving on to item 11, and Mark and Sam Casey Rareeye are going to jointly present. Sam, thank you there, and Simon, thank you for being patiently waiting for this particular bit. Yes. And Mark or Sam, who is going to?
So we thought as I'm sat in the room, if I do the introduction and then Sam can correct everything that I've said that's wrong and summarise at the end if there's any requirement. I should say, Councillor Fulsham is the portfolio holder for this, and he unfortunately can't be here, so I've been asked to stand in. So my level of knowledge on this is not anywhere near the level that Andy would have been able to share, but Sam is there to provide us with support. Plus, we've got the officers here to help. I am pleased to be able to introduce the update of the Corporate Transformation Programme report to this committee. South and Vale have been delivering a transformation programme for the last couple of years. Initially, the programme focused heavily on technology developments, which were crucial to the upcoming exit from Capita contracts, which I believe you discussed at the last meeting. Now that these foundations are in place, it is time to refresh the programme, placing greater emphasis on meeting our financial challenges and using our resources in most effective and proportionate ways. We need to develop a culture of continuous change, adhering to our best value duties and ensuring our residents receive quality services within the appropriate budget envelope. Simon Hewings is here to provide some financial context to the refresh programme, and then Corinne Eder will join us via Teams and will provide an overview of the changes themselves. Thank you.
Sam, would you like to add anything?
I'll I will, thank you. I will just add that I think, summary, this is obviously, just a report for you to note, but just to summarise it, I think, by saying that we're looking at the objectives that we're trying to achieve here are speed, so greater speed, avoiding slippage, ensuring that we can move more quickly with projects without being too, I suppose, looking at the perfect as the enemy of the good. Obviously, the objectives, as it is set out in the report, are the 100,000 per annum savings per council that we have to achieve, that we're aiming to achieve. Looking at impact, how can we achieve greater impact with the changes? And then, as has already been said, that idea of a culture change. So moving, I think we're already on the way to that, but moving in that direction of allowing things to move more quickly, but at the same time having the right governance in place, so those risks, we're fully cognizant of it as a council.
Thank you very much. Simon, do you want to add?
Yeah.
And then I'll open it up for debate discussion.
I think after me, Corinne will start the presentation.
Oh, right.
I'm just going to speak sort of very briefly, and effectively just remind councillors from both councils, because the narrative was the same in both budget reports, of some of the financial context for the transformation work. So in the budget report, for both budget reports in February, I wrote that I was satisfied that the budget for 24-25 was both prudent and robust. And as those of you who remember, it was an improvement over the previous budgeted positions that we've reported. But basically, to maintain that position in future years required non-inflationary cost pressures to be managed so that net expenditure remains sustainable. So in the budget, we make allowance for inflation, salary inflation, contract inflation, but we didn't make allowance for other non-inflationary pressures. We've already talked tonight about some that might come along in due course. Basically, I think we're in a reasonably sound position, certainly compared to a lot of authorities, in that we're able, in the event of significant pressures coming forward, we'll be able to deal with them in a timely manner. And as we all know, we've got a new government and we don't know what they're going to do with local government funding. So our financial position remains unclear, as it has done for a while. So the transformation activity is obviously key to helping deal with the increasing budget gap. We did, as has been noted, we have budgeted for a savings of 100,000 per annum cumulative at each council to go into the budget, and to support that, the transformation team was made contractually permanent. And clearly, it is in our interests for us to, make savings and do things more efficiently than cut services to balance budgets. That's clearly what the aim would be. I thought I would also just remind everybody of the legislative position. Both councils are required under legislation to comply with the best value duty. That best value duty requires all councils to make arrangements, and this is a direct quote from legislation, make arrangements to secure continuous improvement in the way in which its functions are exercised, having regard to a combination of economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And that again is one of the key themes of transformation, is basically how can we do things that we have to do or want to do as efficiently and as effectively as possible at the lowest cost. That is actually a requirement on us, and the transformation team will help us fulfill that.
Okay. Lee, I'm going to, if you wait, no, just wait. I think we're going to have the presentation from Corinne and then we'll launch into comments, thoughts. Corinne, welcome. And Simon says you have a presentation for us. Thank you.
I do, yeah, only really quick one. So yeah, hopefully won't take too long.
We're very, very happy because we haven't seen any pictures for a while in this meeting. So it's good.
Well, firstly, apologies because I was meant to be in the room, but obviously, yeah, things changed at the last minute.
Don't apologise, that's fine. Okay.
You were going to give me bonus points for being in the room, though, so I feel like you need to deduct those right in the start.
Yeah, you lost those. No.
Anyway, so yes, the refresh programme. So we've looked at everything that we were delivering, all the different projects, and I think what was clear was that transformation meant a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I think there's a lot of projects going on, and quite rightly, but it was never fully defined kind of which were the big ones, which were kind of the ones that really are just part of business as usual, and the services should just be allowed to get on with them. So what we've tried to do in Appendix 1 is set that framework. So we've created these 3 categories: strategic transformation, and these are the highest ones, the ones that will form part of the corporate transformation programme. So when we talk about a transformation programme, these are the ones that we're really focusing on. The ones with the highest risks or the highest investment, the most kind of, the ones with the strategic significance or that have the most political priorities. So those are the top ones. Then we've got the middle group, the operational change. They're the ones that really concern kind of primarily one service area, 1 or 2 service areas. So it's a big change, but it doesn't actually impact the rest of the councils. So that's the middle one. And then you've got the bottom, the service improvement, which is really just the continuous improvement that Simon was talking about in our best value duty. It's, you know, basically gearing up those services for continually assessing what they do and how they deliver. So those are the 3 categories. We've defined those. We've set the criteria for which projects fall into the different categories. And then you'll see from the table as well that it starts that kind of to define how do we allocate resources to that, and where does the money come from, and kind of where do we sign things off. Really what we're trying to do with this is that proportionate response. So we allocate the appropriate resources to the bigger, more strategic projects. The other ones still continue to, they should happen. We should assist and kind of offer advice and guidance corporately, but we don't need an over bureaucratic kind of way that they have to be delivered. So that's that. Then we talk about this roadmap of key decisions. I think there are some really key things around contracts ending, different delivery models that need to be explored. If we take all of those things in isolation and start looking at them service by service, it's you will only actually ever look at kind of, well, what does that mean for those residents receiving that service and for that service, you know, in isolation. We need to start looking holistically about, well, what does that mean if we potentially insourced a service over here? Does that open up opportunities for other contracts? You know, are there different things, different decisions that you would make, or different ways that you would look at things if you looked at everything holistically and together? So what we're trying to do is collect all of those key decisions, trying to find a point that we can bring them together so that you can look at them, you know, as I say, holistically and with the impacts, and understand what one decision might mean to kind of all of the dependencies and have the impact on the other decisions. The minimal viable product is really just a way of saying that we want to start accelerating the delivery. So where we've got projects now that could be everything, I think what we need to start tying down to is, what are the things that are going to give us the biggest bang for our buck, really? Where's going to be the biggest impact, and what's that critical path to get us to that end product? The other things, the bonus bits, the nice to have, it's not that we're saying that they should be lost, it's that we're saying that they are not crucial straight away if we're striving for tangible, accelerated delivery. Those are the bits that would then become part of the service planning and those kind of service improvements, you know, in the later years. Kind of everything that Simon said about the financial situations, we're looking at financial assessments for all of the projects that we've got in train at the moment. How much are they costing? What's their projections in the future to deliver the rest of the projects? And where are those opportunities to make savings? Identify them, tie them down, and then they will be put into the MTFP when it comes back to you, kind of the next iteration around September time. And then this coordinated change management and communication, that's really, again, if we do things separately, it's separate communication to residents about separate things. What we're trying to do here is say this corporate transformation programme will have multiple impacts. So we're trying to map those out and say what's the collective impact to residents, to officers, to members, and how can we communicate that in a coordinated manner. This is essentially what's in Appendix 2 in the report. So we've got the strategic transformation projects on the left and the key decisions list. This is not fixed, I guess, is the thing to say for this. The strategic transformation projects are the ones that are in that category now. I guess the main way to look at this is that it's flexible. So things will happen that will increase risks on some of the other projects. You know, it could be new legislation comes out and you change the scope of a project, or it may be that a risk has, you know, there's been a massive delay and it's really increased the risk, which would put things into this strategic pile. Other ones will come out when we start de-risking things and we've got a good confidence in their delivery. So this will change all the time, and there is an ability for projects to move within those three categories quite easily. The key decisions, these are the ones that we're starting with, but again, this is just going to be a forward plan that is going to grow and kind of continue. And the final slide, hopefully you'll be pleased to know, this is trying to kind of visually get across that it's about that continuous change culture. So it's not about saying we deliver the projects and in 2 years' time, that's it, we're done with transformation, you know, nothing else happens. This is about saying that actually, as part of this, yes, we want to deliver the projects that we've got there, but we also want to build that kind of organisational capability. So in the report, it mentions about bringing the corporate programmes team and the transformation team together. So we build that resilience of a bigger team. We need to create them their reputation as a sort of a centre of excellence. We need to build toolkits so that we can actually support people in the services to think in this kind of potentially in a more commercial way in some areas, looking at different ways to continually deliver the projects. And then that will just lead and build year on year to continuous change. I guess the only thing to say about this slide is that I realise now that it looks like we're starting from zero, which obviously we're not, because we've been at transformation for, you know, the last couple of years. I guess this is about saying from the baseline that we're at now with the refreshed programme, things will grow at a steady pace. That's really all this slide is about saying. And that's it. So hopefully that just gave you a quick summary of the report.
Great, thank you very much. Very clear, excellent. Right. So now me first, and if Sam and Mark initially, whoever want to answer, and then you can offer it to Corinne or Simon. Hey, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. The first thing I want to talk about is the budget, because we've talked in this report about the 100,000 per year accumulating year by year by year each year that passes. But in the budget, we banked all of the tax-based growth and the housing growth as income, but we didn't put anything in to the budget for the cost growth that would arise from extra housing and tax-based growth. So that in the course of the budget, we said on top of the 100,000, the further transformation benefits were going to take away the costs that would arise from these extra volume pushes from the extra housing and tax base. And then we said, and I think we've alluded to this gently as well, that the new contracts represented a really significant change for us that might in and of themselves quite likely even would in and of themselves bring us new significant costs. So what I'm saying is that the sheer scale of what's required for transformation to deliver is huge. In terms of the key projects that are listed, one that to my mind is not mentioned that should be included is the housing strategy and the potential for council housing, which I think under this government we might expect to see, and which might be a very significant change for the council. But given how much money is riding on this, and given the weight that we've had to see this transformation report, I was expecting to see some timelines, some of the key projects that were going to perhaps be 20% of the overall changes, but the ones that were going to really present 80% of the benefits.
Form it into a question.
So my questions were there going to be things like a cellar, which I think is absolutely critical within these numbers. I was expecting to see to be significantly presented and to see some milestones and some time when we might begin to get to the point where we could see some benefits arising. So I've got no timescales and no costings at this point. I don't disagree with any of the philosophical comments that have been made about how you go about this thinking, but I am a bit disappointed that we're not yet looking at something tangible on paper.
Okay. Question.
Shall I
I'm
come
very
in on that
minded
first of
to
all?
hand it straight to Sam, but so actually I think there's two elements there. There's the costing bit that you started with, so perhaps Simon can address that. But
Although Sam was indicating she might want to come in.
Okay.
Yeah. Sam?
Yeah, no, I think there are probably 3 elements or something of that. But I just want, and I agree with Mark that maybe Simon can talk about the budgeting elements that Lee's brought up. But I just want to, and then Corinne can maybe address some of the more detail on the rest of the questions. But I did just want to say to Lee that I think or Councillor Rawlins, I should say, that the point of this is that it's an interim. It's for you to, joint scrutiny to look at this and to note this report. But it's about changing the way we approach things and approach those risks and those really important higher risk projects, bearing in mind those 100,000 savings plus the other things you have put in place. So it's changing the organizational culture. And if I don't know how many of you work for big organizations, but changing the organizational culture is a really important thing as part of what that transformation that we're talking about is, to deal with those changes in legislation that you brought in. I mean, you talk about housing. I'm not sure we're going to be doing much in the way of house building because of this government's idea of house building will be in the private sector. But anyway, we can debate that separately. But I think it's putting in place a better governance structure. You're having a clear eye on the risks that you have brought out. And I do note that you're talking about we need some more costings, we need some more timelines. I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I'll go back to what Corinne's and ask Corinne to give the detail on that. But I think that's where we are in this report at this stage. But I note your concerns and I think they're important, but I don't think we're there yet. But I'll ask Simon and Corinne to just give some more detail on that, if that's okay.
If I pick up the budget point, I mean, you're right. The budget report posited inflationary growth only, no non-inflationary growth. There are all sorts of variables in a budget. Who knows what government funding will be? Who knows what inflation's going to do? Who knows what interest rates are going to do? My gut feeling is that we will need more than the 100,000 per annum to deal with our challenges going forward, which is why transformation is key.
Yes,
because transformation is something we should be doing anyway, clearly. And in fact, if you read intervention reports into councils that have failed, they identify the lack of transformation, and those teams working on this and embedding the sorts of continuous improvement culture Corinne talked about. But that is why transformation is crucial. So in terms of the budget points, you're correct.
Corinne, do you want to add anything? And then I'll come to Jeff.
So I was just going to pick up on the milestones and benefits point. Yes, absolutely. That is the stage that we're working at the moment. The reason why it's not in this report is because we're just not there yet. The reason why we're not there is because, you know, is everything that Sam said, that it's basically, we've just refreshed the programme at the moment. We've put this new structure, new framework around it. We're now looking at the projects in that top category to do that critical path thinking, to do that kind of, you know, what is this minimum viable product? So are we actually focusing in the right direction? Are we actually doing the right things to get us to the end point as fast as possible to realise those benefits? So that's going to change the timelines. It's going to change the expenditure for those projects. And also, I guess up to this point, we haven't been looking at things in a savings type way because of everything that Simon's been saying. And I guess because we've been kind of projecting that the target was quite low. I think there's now this imperative to start looking at everything and identify as many opportunities as possible. So we're going back to the drawing board and we're looking at everything and going, right, is this focused in the right direction? How much is it actually going to cost us? Is it the right thing to be doing? And where are the benefits going to be coming from? All of that stuff is going on at the moment and would be available in a future report. But I understand your frustration that you've not got it now.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, thank you very much for this. I'm really interested in this organisational culture and changing an organisational culture, because I don't really know much about this. The idea of, on page 116, failing fast, having an agile organisation with staff who are freer to make decisions and to feel safe to fail. I guess my question is around, what are the checks and balances on that? How do we avoid a situation whereby, for example, like some councils in the country, we invest in potentially financially risky things? You know, what are the checks and balances? And when we talk about decision making, how, I'm assuming that all those decisions are made and they're saturated with corporate plan priorities. Is that what's, you know, I guess the corporate plan is feeding into the decision making, but what are the checks and balances to make sure that people are not feeling suffocated, they're free to make choice and to, you know, but at the same time, they're not free to completely bankrupt us? Sorry, can't you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. I guess the first thing to say is that, you know, the governance is still there. So still the big decisions still have to go to cabinets. You know, there will still be the scrutiny call-in. So all of those types of things, it's not just that we're delegating it down to officers and saying make a decision and then suddenly everything goes wrong. All of those things are still in place. I guess what this is trying to do is to say, if we can make decisions a bit faster and give an opportunity for testing, then that's better in the long run than spending sort of 6 months doing all of the analysis and looking at all of the data and saying, oh, is this the right decision? Is it not? We could get the minimum amount of data, say sort of what's the political will, what's everyone else doing, look at our benchmarks, and then make a decision and test it. And within that same time frame, we could be much further down the line. This is the smaller decisions. We're not talking about decisions around, you know, should we in-source a service? That wouldn't be something that we would make a decision quickly on. This is just about how you make changes. Kind of, it's that continuous improvement stuff, really. And I guess in terms of changing the culture, it's about trying to break down that blame culture. We don't want people to feel like, oh, I made that decision and everything's going to come at me if it was wrong. There were all manner of reasons why decisions can turn out to be the wrong decision, and that's not always the decision maker's fault. So yeah, it's just, there's a lot of culture behind it that we need to do from the leaders all the way down. We need to support people in making the best decision at that time with the available information. And I think that's the key point. Make sure that we've got the clear information available. Note down all of our assumptions at the time of making that decision, and the checks and balances come in where the assumptions, if the assumptions are proved wrong at a later date, then you go back and you reassess that decision and say, okay, if the information was different, would the decision be different? There's also internal audit that are going to be on this. So as we're making this change, we're going to bring internal audit in to kind of come and assess every decision kind of 2 months post decision being made. And there's an internal assurance route as well within the corporate programs and transformation team. We will try and set up an assurance, almost like a program management type office assurance control element to it, so that we understand all of the decisions that have been made. We can note them down. We understand the information that have been made on, and then where those changes happen, we can go and reassess.
Great. Can I just follow up on that and bring Simon in? Sorry, through Mark and Sam as well. How are you thinking of going about changing the culture of SODC stroke Vale? How do you communicate that to the departments, to the people that we employ? How does it actually happen? Are you going to start with a particular department as a trial, or you're just going to?
Chair, Mark Minion.
How?
Mark Minion has his hand.
I mean, Corrie may come in on as well, but we have got in my team organisational development people who are supporting that culture change, that way of thinking that Corrie's outlined there, which is right, is, I can take a risk with that, provided it's within the governance structures of the councils, the constitution, and financial procedure rules. But it is changing that mindset and people thinking in a different way. We've done that with hybrid working. Some people who are further forward on that journey, and we're pushing them further and further. So it's bringing in that resource to support Corrie and others with that as well. So that's how we're going to do that as well. So it's not just down to Corrie or Simon or myself. We've got other resource to do that as well. Corrie, I don't think there's anything you want to add to that.
No, apart from that, I guess it wouldn't necessarily be service by service. I would say it's probably project by project, because that's where decisions are going to be made. That's kind of where we're at the forefront. We can note down the decisions. We're in this kind of governance framework, I guess. So if we can pilot a project where it's working, you've got a more limited group of stakeholders and kind of project officers that you can test, and then we can see what it's worked. You've got then the success stories. We can then start sharing that with the other projects, learning those lessons. It's easier to do it project by project rather than sort of service by service. But ultimately, it will all roll out.
We have started that with customer services. We've started that journey with them 12 months ago to change their way of thinking, the way they operate. We had two very distinct teams. We've brought them together. They're one team. They're cross experiencing, that's cross skilling each other as well. And that way of thinking is starting to imbue in the work that they're doing, and they're starting to be more creative about how they do solutions. So, for example, with the recent general election, customer services front of house was supporting the elections team to get on with the election stuff. And those sort of general inquiries that were coming through the door or over the phone, the customer services team were doing. So it's starting to think, actually, can I do this differently? What does customer transformation mean? It's not just customer services. It's about who's my customer, what do they need, how can I support them? It doesn't need necessarily a professional officer to do that basic first line inquiry. So that work is already started, and that's what we're going to build upon.
Catherine, Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. Karina, I'd just like to come back a little bit on this point about failing fast. Because as Scrutiny Chair, and you specifically mentioned Scrutiny calling, which is why I'm coming back to it. Because actually, I can think of a couple of examples. There have been at least 2 examples since I've been Chair, which is only just over a year, where actually the alert that there's issue with a project has come by asking chairs to waive their scrutiny call-in because a decision now needs to be made really quickly because there's been an issue down the line. So I know at least there's at least one lessons learned document that's being prepared, and we've asked that to come to Vale Scrutiny. But I'm just interested in, and you mentioned that it's not going to be kind of at the project scale that this failing fast is going to happen. But I'm interested in the implications and a scrutiny then how we can help with the kind of lessons learned aspect of this at all, if at all.
I think.
Sorry, I've
sorry,
directed that at Mark.
That's fine. Let the people who understand
Through Mark.
There we go. Kareen, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, twice in the last year, that's too many. That shouldn't have happened. I think we do that. A lot of it, I think, might be to do with building that capability of kind of project management and the decision points, where they are, where they have to go, ensuring that we've got that forward plan. There's a bit of work that we're doing at the moment around that, obviously starting with those key decisions, but it will sort of set the scene, I guess, for moving down into each of the projects. Things shouldn't be coming as a surprise that they have to go to these various different, governance structures. Having said that, they are, I mean, I don't know the two that you're talking about. I could probably guess the most recent one. There are obviously always going to be things that happen out of the blue. And I guess we can just work together to make that a better process from either side. I don't really have the answer because I don't know the ones that you're referring to or the background, but there's nothing to stop us working with you more directly and saying, how do you want this to be raised better? How could it work? Because if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for officers either, does it? It's we need to have as smooth a process as possible for both sides.
I think in response, I would say that. Oh, sorry, Sam.
No, I was just going to come in there, and I mean, Kieran can correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, working with the officers on this, is that it's not so much failing faster as failing earlier. So it's almost like in the project, it's understanding the possible risks, if you like, earlier on, so officers are trying new things, and we want to really encourage that. And obviously in our corporate plans, we will have some really big sort of changes that we want to happen, but we want to make sure those changes are effective, don't we, and actually work. And so this sort of transformation program will hopefully allow new ideas to come forward, but if they're not going to work, then they fail earlier. So we don't want to discourage people from officers for trying new things, but we want to make sure that we're holding the risk properly as an organisation, so that those things actually don't happen. I think that you're referring to, Kat, or that they happen less often, if at all possible. And obviously, like, there are things that come up and unforeseen, and that we all know that. But that idea, I think, failing faster is possibly what we're trying to say is failing earlier in the project, because we've all got eyes on it.
Simon?
Well, I was just going to sort of follow in on that. I mean, culturally, you want the officers to be in a position where they are, if they know something's going to fail, failing early is the best thing, is the best course of approach. If they're too scared, or the culture doesn't sort of present that, then that project will run until it's far too late. Far more money's been spent, and it's a real disaster. And again, there are intervention reports in councils that explain where that's happened. A project was known it wasn't going to work, but no one dared raise their head above the parapet and say. So that's the culture we want, not the culture that takes us down the road that the councils have gone.
Thank you. Ed? And then Andrew.
Actually, fail fast and management and change, all these things, and they just seem to be straight out of the handbook that the company I work for, GE. Because fail fast, my understanding of fail fast is very much a case of
to, get over it actually, if something's not working, to realise that quickly and dump it. Because there's no point in backing it and backing it and backing it just because you don't want to be seen to be loss of face. So I don't think it's so much failing early. I mean, obviously that's the right thing to do if it's not working, but fail fast is definitely about coming to that realization very quickly. Certainly a lot of the culture change that came with that was about setting up those values. They call them values. It's very American, but it's obviously that's what they were trying to get across. And actually, once people get it, it's a really good way of working. I think Belfast will work really well.
Thank you, Lee.
Some of the bases, when we look at the list of projects and so forth, some of the bases that we're coming from are bases that in one way or another are burning. So from our point of view, we don't entirely have this risk question of shall we do something or shall we do nothing. Actually, we don't have a choice to do nothing.
Because the rug is being
so we are going to have to do the something, and it's how we do that. And obviously the cross-functional organisation processes and not being in silos and all that good stuff is the right approach. If we look at something like a cellar where we probably can't stay where we are, even if we wanted to for very long, we have to go to IDOCs, and we have to go through the ideas of, do we change our processes to fit IDOCs, or do we change IDOCs to fit our old processes? We're probably going to have to make internal change, which is within the allowable range of what we can do in planning. So I think, unfortunately, the reality is we're just going to have to do so many of these things because there really isn't another option of do nothing. Yeah. Finally, Sam, you mentioned about housing. I wasn't sweetly in a world in which I thought that somebody was going to ask us to have a direct labour department and big foundations or anything. But I do think we will be asked to take on debt and to look at council housing one way or another. And therefore, I think that housing will become more of an issue as perhaps it was in the past. And be another one to add to the agenda of things we have to look at. That was the context of my thinking.
Fair enough, and it's a moving. I think it's from what Kieran said. She was saying that those projects are obviously going to be moving projects. They're not specific ones that will then, once that's done, that's done. The idea of this framework is there's a whole bunch of projects that will be coming in and others dropping out, or of that list. Yeah. And housing may well be one, of course. Yeah.
So I think
sorry.
If I may, yes, I think one of the good things about this strategy are those characteristics. So by looking at the characteristics of any change, so for example, housing, we can target them against those bullets, and then that determines whether it goes into the strategic or the operational change. So things are being compared across the piece rather than just, we need to do something right now.
I think in some cases we're going to have to say, by that date, we're going to have a solution. Now let's work back and say what we have to do to get there.
Yeah, but at least we've got a mechanism of measuring that to determine it, rather than just it sounds like something that's really, really important. Well, let's just make sure it really is.
Are there any other questions, councillors? Because I think we will come to. Sorry, Andrew. Yes, you were right. You were absolutely go for it.
I don't like to hear the word failure. I don't really want to contribute to any strategic approach to business or to getting things done that includes the word failure. And what Simon expressed about people going down the track and keeping on, fine, that kind of thing can happen. But I would rather we talked about no surprises. Yeah, if something isn't going to work, it needs to be flagged up. But really, words can be important, and I don't want to see a culture change that implies, if you don't listen very, very carefully, that we are going to be more tolerant of failure, because I'm not going to be.
I mean, I'm not the specialist on this, but I think the point is it's identifying a need for a change.
Fine.
When the change is, as Lee says, can we do nothing, or do we normally have to do something? But obviously, for most of what we're involved in, we have to do something. But I agree that when you read "fail fast," it can.
It's not a good phrase, but I have lived by no surprises as being, a management culture, and what you say to people is, by all means, do something, try something, but I need to know. If there's something going on, you have to tell me. It's my responsibility not to blame you or kill you or whatever, and it's on the management side. But sorry, but I really, I'm quite serious. Fail fast does not appeal to me. If you can show me that there's some big company that made a real success out of that.
GE.
Fail fast? That's what they say. Well, I'm sorry, GE is not the company it was. I don't know.
SpaceX, they explicitly espouse that.
Oh, yeah, well, let's see where they go in 10 years' time. Right?
But sorry.
Do you like to? I think now it's just to support that.
Okay.
I suppose acknowledge in terms of like the use of language and how that can come across. So just picking up on the point that actually Kat said in terms of lessons learned, maybe it's more about the learning that's. So in terms of if you recognise something early, you need to change, you learn it as quickly as you can, and then you use that to move on. So it could be something that we could look to adapt.
Ladies and gentlemen, just to say we've got 7 minutes before we have to extend for time. I don't think we do.
Clarify one point, Stefan.
Yes, in a moment. Yeah.
Sure.
I think 7 minutes we will get this done. So therefore, well, I'm not as chair chopping off the discussion, but I think we're almost there. Actually, yes, do.
You want me to be quick?
No.
Just to clarify on Ocella, which Councillor Rawlings has mentioned a couple of times, there was a decision notice published last week, I think it was, to say that we stopped that project, the Ocella replacement with IDOCs, because that was a project that was running on. And as Corinne has described, it wasn't failing fast, but we realised this was not the solution we were looking for. And I think putting the things in place that Corinne's described, we might have reached that decision earlier. Underline might. But replacing Ocella is time limited. We have to do it within a certain time. IDOCs was the supplier we went with. That didn't work out. We have to go somewhere else now. And we've done that early rather than just, as Simon describes, just putting good money after that. And that's what this project, that's what this report is about, making sure that we do that more speedily. So it's not failing, it's testing something, that doesn't work, move on.
Chair, I would
leave that another couple of comments.
I would suggest we accept this report. We ask for the financial elements to be beefed up to recognise that there are other pressures that are in there, and therefore the total may be rather bigger than it suggests here, and that we should look to see headline target dates as soon as possible against these projects before we in future see, no doubt, complex project plans that will lead there. But we need to get some things established as to the kinds of timelines that we've got to work to.
Would the committee be happy with that approach? Lee, pop it in a proposal and then we will.
I propose.
You already have.
That's what I just said. We accept this report. We ask for the recognition that there are bigger financial challenges that might be out there, and that we ask for some timelines for these projects as soon as possible, please, even if it's in very simple form initially.
Okay.
Chair, did we want to have a little bit more clarification around failing fast? I don't mind it, but I think some members of the committee might mind it. Just some more clarity around it might be helpful.
Explaining what it means.
Recognising when things are going wrong and not being locked into some cost.
Yeah. Yeah, and I yes, if I can just reply to that, Joe. Thank you for that. I think it is important. I think sometimes things that you hear from management speak, etc., from the private sector, people are, I think, I was anyway, quite cautious about it with the public sector. We're dealing with public money. We have to be possibly a little bit more circumspect about the language we use. So I think yeah, a bit more detail around that would be really helpful. And thank you for mentioning that. I think that was clear from the committee's approach that yeah, you're worried about that, and we need some more clarity.
I've just added there more thought around to be given to the terminology around failing fast and what would be appropriate for a council.
Yes.
Something like that.
So we've had a proposal, seconded. Ron, there we go. Ron, right, let's vote on that. All those in favour? It's fine. And the only other comment I would say is that when you do change culture and things don't quite work, or things are successful, make sure that they are captured in the corporate memory. Because I'm dealing with something at OCC at the moment where I say, yes, but you decided this in 6 years ago. And they say, because there's no one there actually in the organisation that actually remembers the decision and the context of the decision. So it needs to be, the information needs to go across the organisation and not kept in a silo. This project wasn't successful because spread it out, and this was successful because, and that will help transformation going forward. Right. Okay. Well, again, on that particular item, thank you very much for coming. Corinne, thanks for all the hard work on that. Yeah. And Sam, thanks for coming online and doing it. Mark, thank you for sticking with us all evening. Well done. Absolutely. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. And Simon, thank you. Thank you for coming as well. And all members of the committee. Thank you. Thank you for this.
Thinking, Stefan, at a certain
and
maybe you could just do the designation.
Finally, I've just got 3 items on the agenda. We would have excluded the public at 12 to look at 13 confidential minutes of the last meeting, but we dealt with that earlier in the meeting. And updates on the previous recommendations from Cabinet, we've also dealt with that as well. So
one needs to do that. So yes. You can go to the meeting and
right, okay. So those last items are confirmed. So I close the meeting now. Thank you. Oh, and thank you, Candida, for all your help and work. Thank you.